Hi viewers, in this video we will learn about the history of operating systems. The history of operating systems could not be viewed separately and it is linked with the history and development of various generations of computers. Hence the history of operating systems is described along with the development of different computer generations. Okay, let's see the generations of computers and operating systems one by one. The generations of computers are classified as 5 generations, namely 0th generation, 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th generations. The generations are classified based on the types of central components used, that is processors, memory, storage and other devices. 0th generation. In this generation only the first computer was designed. Charles Babbage, who was a mathematician, designed this computer and it was of mechanical design. This computer was made up of wheels, gears, cogs and so on. This computer was not popular because it was slow and unreliable. There was no operating system used in this machine and in this generation. Next is the first generation. This generation computers were electronic rather than mechanical machines. These were designed as calculating machines and were with vacuum tubes as the central components. These machines were very huge and generated enormous heat. The vacuum tubes got burnt very fast during running. In a single run, almost 10,000 to 20,000 tubes could be wasted. These computers were programmed through a machine language, which could be termed to be the first generation programming language. There were no assembly language or high-level languages in this generation. These were single-user machines and were extremely not friendly to users and programmers. Again, there was no operating system for these computers in this generation also. These are the few images of first generation vacuum tube computers. From the images we can learn the size and the number of tubes used in the computers. Okay, we will move on to the next generation. Next is the second generation computers. These computers were using transistors as the central components. These transistors were introduced in the USA at AT&T company around 1955. Introduction of transistors dramatically reduced the size and the cost of the machine, and the reliability of the computers also improved. For the first time there were new categories of professionals called systems analysts. Designers, programmers and operators existed as a separate entities. In this generation, there were assembly language as the second generation language and Fortran as a high level language, that is third generation language, got emerged. The computers in this generation were batch systems. There were two important computers belonged to this era, namely IBM 1401 and IBM 7094. IBM 1401 was used as a satellite computer and IBM 7094, a faster and larger computer, was used in coordination with IBM 1401. In IBM 1401, only one job could be run at a time. In the batch systems, the computers were loaded and unloaded with cards and tapes before and after the jobs. This process is known as setup and teardown operations respectively. The cards giving information about the jobs are known to be control cards. These are collectively known as an object deck or an object program. You can understand the same using the diagram given here. The programs were written in assembly language in this generation. To compile the same, assemblers were used. In this generation, the CPU was an electronic device and input-output devices remained electromechanical devices. Here, all the cards to be fed one by one were copied onto a tape using a card-to-tape utility program. This was done on an IBM 1401, which was used as a satellite computer as shown in figure 1. The prepared tape J was taken to IBM 7094 computer and processed as shown in figure 2. In this figure, tape A as an input tape and tape B as an output tape. The reports to be printed was dumped onto the tape B, which was carried to slower 1401 computer again for printing as shown in figure 3. Due to this process, the efficiency increased. To carry out this process, the IBM 7094 had two basic operating systems, namely IBCs and Fortran monitor system. The IBM 1401 was supplied with an operating system, namely autocoder, an input-output control system which was developed in assembly language. In this generation, there were no system calls, there were no database management systems, online systems, and there were no concept of networking of computers. Transaction processing started emerging in this era only. In this generation, a master control program was supplied with the computers which had the recent day features such as multiprogramming, multiprocessing, and virtual storage. Here what you see is the typical IBM 1401 computer. You can see how big it was, and there were no keyboard or display devices. Only what you could see are a CPU, tape drives, a console, card read and punch, and a printer. Here is the IBM 7094 computer, which was totally different from 1401 from its design and functionality. This computer only was called as the faster and larger computer. This is how the computers were in the second generation. The next generation of computers, what we are going to see, is the third generation. This generation computers were based on integrated circuits as the central components. In this generation, IBM introduced System Bar 360 series of computers. These computers were mutually compatible computers. The programs working in one computer was working with the other in the same family. This reduced the conversion efforts. Hence, the concept of family of computers emerged in this generation. The computers IBM 370, 43XX, 30XX belong to the same family. IBM started converting the existing 1401 computers to System Bar 360, for which they provided two utilities, namely simulators and emulators. Simulators were software driven and was little slow, whereas the emulators were using hardware modifications to enhance the speed of the computers. IBM planned to provide one single operating system for all the computers in the family, but they failed in their attempt. The major advantages or features and problems of this generation and its operating systems were as follows. The first one was integrated circuits. The System Bar 360 computers were based on integrated circuits, that is ICs. Due to these ICs, the cost and size of the computer got reduced and the performance has got improved. The second was portability. The operating systems for the System Bar 360 were written in assembly language. Therefore, it was very complex and time consuming to write and maintain the programs. The errors continued to be existing for a longer period. Since assembly language programs written for a specific machine was not able to be ported to another with a different architecture. Hence, portability was a problem in this generation. Job control language was one of the key features of this generation. It was developed to allow communication between user or programmer and the computer along with its operating system. After the introduction of this job control language only, the user or the programmer was able to instruct the computer and the operating system to perform a certain task. Next feature is the multiprogramming. Though the operating systems were supporting mainly batch processing, but multiprogramming became popular in this generation. From the given diagram, you can understand that in multiprogramming, the physical memory was divided into many partitions and each was holding a separate program. Previously, it was one CPU at a time could execute only one program. Hence, multiprogramming was a major advantage of this generation since it increased the execution time because the CPU won't be idle during I/O operations. Spooling. Simultaneously peripheral operations online, spool, was developed during this period only. Through this spooling, the jobs in the form of cards could be read into the disk, then OS would load it into the memory one after another. This allowed smooth multiprogramming operations. The last feature of this generation was time sharing. Though the operating system was enhanced with multiprogramming, but it was not equipped to meet the requirements of the interactive users. Through time sharing, the operating system started giving priority to interactive processes over batch processes. Customer information control system was provided by IBM was providing data communication facility between the terminal and the computer. It was functioning like transaction processing monitor. Many vendors came up with time sharing operating systems during this period. One of the first time sharing systems was compatible time sharing system, and it was used in IBM 7094. Multics, multiplexed information and computing service, was the next operating system to time sharing operating system. After this, Unix was introduced, and its major part was written in assembly language, hence there existed problem for porting. Later on, Unix had been rewritten in high-level language using C language, and only 10% of the kernel and the hardware-dependent routines were written in assembly language. The introduction of Unix only made a tremendous impact on all the future developments. Finally, the fourth generation computers. This generation uses microprocessors as central components. Large-scale integration circuits made thousands of transistors packaged on a single small silicon chip. In this generation, a computer is made up of many units such as a CPU, memory, I/O interfaces, and so on. Each of these made up of different modules such as registers, adders, multiplexers, decoders, and a variety of other digital circuits. Each is made up of several gates. Control program for microcomputers was first OS on the microcomputer platform developed in the year 1947. It became popular due to its user-friendliness. After this, IBM introduced a single-user disk operating system, PC-DOS, and Microsoft introduced MS-DOS. These were user-friendly operating systems. In this generation, the other products such as database systems, word processing, spreadsheet, and many others were developed under DOS. Later, MS-DOS was influenced by Unix. There was a rapid development after this, and the graphical user interface started emerging. Microsoft came up with MS Windows, and it was a very user-friendly graphical user interface that time. Distributed processing started becoming a reality. There were two responses to this development. One was network operating system, and a distributed operating system are introduced in this generation. That's all, viewers. I think I need not explain any more about where we are at present. I think you had a tough time listening to this video about a very long history of operating system along with the history of computers. I will meet you with a different topic in my next video. Thank you.